Hello everyone, welcome to my video. Starting from this video, we are entering the second part of the course Individual Income Tax in China, which is Taxpayers of IIT in China. In this section, I will explain which individuals belong to the taxpayers and how to classify those taxpayers, what obligations for each type of taxpayer, and how to determine whether an income sources from China. So the first question is scope of taxpayers. In China's individual income tax, the following individuals are included in the scope of taxpayers. Number one, natural persons. Natural persons include foreign nationals and compatriots in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Number two, owners of individual business. Number three, investors of sole proprietorships. And number four, individual partners of a partnership enterprise. As mentioned in last chapter, individual businesses, sole proprietorships, and partnership enterprises are all registered institutions in China. As to an individual business or a sole proprietorship or partnership enterprise, the tax obligations for them are considered as its owners or its investors or its partners. So the owner of the other investor or the partner are included into taxpayers of IIT. Just knowing which individuals belong to taxpayers is not enough. We also need to classify them according to their tax status, because different tax status have different tax obligations. So we continue to talk about classification of taxpayers. Based on domicile and period of stay in China, taxpayers are classified into two types, which are tax resident and non-tax resident. Generally, a China tax resident is liable to individual income tax on his or her worldwide income, while a China non-tax resident is liable to IIT only on his or her income sourced from China. This principle is applicable to both IIT and enterprise income tax. Finally, we're talking about the first type, tax residents. Individuals who meet any of the following conditions can be considered as tax residents of China. Scenario 1. Individual who is domiciled in China. It means that if an individual resides within China, he or she is a China tax resident. There's one thing, if I don't say it, you definitely don't know. The thing is, in tax practice, in fact, whether you have a domicile in China is usually marked by whether you have household registration in China. So, what is household registration? Household registration is China's resident identity and information management system, including personal basic information, family relations, marital status, etc. Individuals with Chinese nationality usually have household registration. So in tax practice, one person with Chinese nationality is usually considered as an individual who is domiciled within China. On the contrary, one person with no Chinese nationality is considered as an individual who is not domiciled within China. That's the meaning. As to this scenario, you should pay attention to the following 2 points. Number 1, within China. What's meaning? Within China refers to the customs territory. That is to say, the mainland region, excluding Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. So within China, not the concept within border, it's just the concept of custom territory. And number two, an individual who has domicile in China refers to anyone who resides habitually in China due to their household registration, families, and economic interests. This is the first scenario. Well, let's look at scenario 2. Scenario 2 means individual who does not have domicile in China but resides within China, and the days of residence within China for 183 days or more in a calendar year. Then he or she is a tax resident. It means that if an individual does not have a domicile in China, his or her tax status shall be decided based on his or her days of residence in China. The days of residence in China is not less than 183 days. As to this scenario, we should also pay attention to the following 2 points. The first one, the taxpayer is from January 1st to December 31st of the Gregorian calendar. And the second, individual who does not have domicile in China, regardless of how many times she or he leaves China within a tax year, as long as he or she has accumulated 183 days of residence within China. These are 2 scenarios for tax residents. Where we talk about next type of taxpayers, non-tax residents. Individuals who meet any of the following conditions can be considered as non-tax residents of China. Scenario 1. An individual who does not have domicile in China and never resides within China. Then he or she is a non-tax resident. In practice, it's usually individuals without Chinese registration who never reside within China. And scenario 2, an individual who does not have domicile in China but resides in China, and the days of residence within China less than 183 days in a calendar year. In this case, the individual does not have domicile in China, and he or she resides in China less than 183 days. He or she is a non-tax taxpayer. There's a question here, how to calculate the days of residence within China. See below. Those who stay within China for at least 24 hours on the same day shall be counted as the number of days of residence within China. Those who stay within China for less than 24 hours on the same day shall not be counted as the number of days of residence within China. These are the 2 scenarios for non-tax residents. As we explained above, in IIT of China, taxpayers are divided into tax residents and non-tax residents based on their tax status. So, in practice, what step do we follow to determine a person's tax status? First, we should check whether he or she has a domicile in China. That is, whether he or she has Chinese registration. If he or she has Chinese registration, he or she is a tax resident. If he or she does not have Chinese registration, then let's go to the second step. The second step. Check the number of days he or she resides in China. If the number of days of residence in China is less than 183 days, he or she shall be deemed as a non-tax resident. On the other hand, if he or she resides in China for 183 days or more, he or she shall be deemed as a tax resident. Once an individual's tax status is determined under this tax status, what tax obligation should he or she bear? Well, let's move on to the next question.